All right, so we will finish up our first webinar here with a presentation from me. And what I want to talk a little bit today about, Heidi reminded me, I've been doing this for almost 7 years now, 6 or 7 years. And what I'm going to discuss a little bit today is something that we came up with in like year 2 or 3 of implementing standards-based grading in a project-based course that I'm teaching where we have students utilize an assignment. It's basically an assignment around the syllabus to create a personal standards-based grading tracking system. So what do I mean by a personalized tracking system? So basically, what I'm having students do is create their own standards-based grading gradebook. And it's a grade book that obviously only has one student in it, but it allows students to, and it basically forces them, but I don't like to use the word force too often, but encourages them to actually read through the syllabus and from the syllabus create a grade book. And so what it essentially does is allow them at any point in time during the semester to be able to say, what do I need to do in this next upcoming assignment to be able to maintain a certain grade or to achieve a grade at the end of the semester? We've all had those students who come up at the end of the semester, they may be on the cusp of failing. They say, what do I need to do to pass this class? Or you've got the students who are saying, oh God, I'm going to fail this class. And they may drop without actually seeing whether or not, hey, if I get a perfect score or if I get a certain level on the remaining assignments, oh wow, I actually will pass this class and I don't need to necessarily drop. So what it's essentially doing is setting them up to be able to track their performance in the class and sort of takes it off your plate. And so what I have them do is use Excel, and again, this is a potential learning opportunity if you're teaching early on in classes to allow students to learn this tool that if they don't have enough experience using that tool, it sort of helps them in that sense. So what does this sort of look like? So what I first do is give them a general template. So this is an example from an older class that I had taught where each one of the letters D, B, M, T, E, C are my learning outcomes. And at this time when I was teaching this class, I also had a series of professional behaviors which were additional learning outcomes for me. And I tell them that what I'm going to be looking for is them to create this automated system in Excel where they can input in values for each one of the assignments. I want it to automatically calculate what their overall course outcome score is going to be for each learning outcome, what their final score is on a number scale. In this particular case, it was a 0 to 4 scale or 0 to 3 scale. And then what is the corresponding letter grade that will be produced by the number score. Okay? So I give them this general template. And then what I do is I provide them with some actual data. So you can see in this particular class, I have a series of projects that the students work on. You can disregard the section number because I had broken it up from mini projects and final projects. But I show them what each one of the assignments was, and then what each assignment is going to be graded on that relates back to the learning outcomes. So for example, the individually demonstrate soldering techniques in the multimeter assembly activity that they did was only assessing their design and build, while the full assembly of a calibrated multimeter was looking at design build, teamwork, and punctuality in that particular case. So I give them some sample data that they can actually use to create their own system. So again, this is something that's being done before they get any of their own grades. This is literally the first thing they would do in class. And again, it's sort of just an assignment around the syllabus itself. So I'm looking at this, and I know this is really small and hard to read, but what you're having them create is this large Excel document that, again, they can use throughout the semester. So while the initial purpose of this assignment for the class that we were teaching was just to make sure that they understood what it was we were going to be assessing them on, and to also help them recognize that, hey, this is on a very different scale than what you're used to. So it is actually on a scale of 0 to 4, as you can see. There are some scores of 4 in there. Oh, sorry, it is a scale of 3. Sorry, the total was 4. But it reminds them too that there are cases, and I've had many of these cases where a student will have a 2.0 in the class and have an A minus in the class and think that they're failing, or think that they have a C in this particular case because they're like, well, 2 out of 3 is a 75 or 66, and you're just like, whoa, what's going on, right? So you want them to become more comfortable with the scale and then how some assignments are going to be assessed on certain things and how that carries more or less weight in the class. All right. So ultimately, you want them to create something that looks a little bit like this. And here are some of the key features of the assignment, at least what we were requesting. And again, just to try to elicit them to uh, recognize that there are these different components and that there's different weightings required to each one. So the first breakdown from that larger picture I had on the previous slide is that you have to provide all the different assignments and all the learning outcomes. So, I'm a month into the class and I actually had a student, we didn't do this assignment this semester and I'm regretting it because I had a student just the other day email me and say, what does DB mean again? And I'm just like, oh, okay. If I just had him do this assignment, it's right in the syllabus, right? And the syllabus is still available to the student, but there was no real reason for him to go back to it. So make sure that you have all the different assignments laid out for the course, and you have a set of what those learning outcomes are so that the students are clear on that. Right? You also want them to add in the whole automated system component to this, right? So have everything be scored automatically so that students can literally go in and change what could potentially be a 1 to potentially be a 3, and they can see how that will impact their overall grade in the course. This way, it sort of allows them to understand if you're using these components in your class, any sort of sum you might be using, any sort of averages you might be using, and any sort of weighting system you might be using. In this particular class, we had it so that the mini projects that they were doing were only worth a small portion of the class, and the final project was worth half of their grade. So this sort of allowed the students to get a better sense of what it meant to get a 3 average score on DB from a mini project versus what it meant to get a 3 average from the final project. And have the students make sure that this is all automated, right? And so again, helping them learn that skill of sort of coding within Excel. All right. And then the final component at the bottom of the personal tracking system that we had them create showed the total learning outcome scores. So this way, even if they don't have scores available to them in the above projects that you have them doing or the above assignments that you have them doing, they can still put in and count and add in manual scores that don't average out above, and they can get a better sense of what it means, right, to get a certain number final score and then how that equates to the letters. The equating to the letter, again, is sort of crucial to make sure that you don't have those students thinking they're failing because they're used to that traditional scoring system, and allowing them to recognize what scale you're using in your class. Again, creating this so it's all automated, but does allow them, if they want to manually type in a score, we found to be super useful in terms of helping students sort of get a better understanding of what this is. So we found that these different components really, really helped. Again, I mentioned this before, but it is also a super great way, even if it's not in a first year class, you'll find that, I mean, we have a lot of transfer students this is a second year course, who just have never used Google Drive, Google Sheets, Google Docs. Many of them don't have that advanced level of skill in terms of Excel or numbers if they're using a Mac. And so it sort of served as sort of an additional purpose. So it wasn't just, hey, I need to create an assignment so that they can understand the grading system. It's also an assignment to help them learn sort of this technical skill. So it sort of became embedded within the course. So this was just a very simple assignment that we embedded, again, around the syllabus, and you can modify the assignment to fit whatever, however you are implementing standards-based grading. So yeah, any questions?
Great, thanks, Adam. I had a couple questions for you. Number one, do you let students give any feedback in terms of the actual objectives that you're assessing? Do you take any of their kind of input in terms of like maybe modifying the objectives for next time that you teach it? And then also, have you found that this assignment that you have them kind of create this grading book, does that actually help them kind of calibrate their expectations and sort of adjust to what your your kind of assessment levels are?
Sure. So, in terms of your first question around student feedback, so I have had students ask me why is a certain assignment being assessed on a certain skill, and over time that has actually modified and actually helped me change and inform what my learning outcomes are for the course. So I have taken that in effect. It's not that there's sort of an embedded component when they submit this assignment that asks them for feedback on the different assignments, but it is something that sort of emerges typically as we're going throughout the semester. You find that a number of students are using these tracking systems, and that they tend to ask some questions, or it appears sort of in the end of semester evaluations. Can you remind me what the second question was, Matt?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Does this kind of assignment help them kind of calibrate
Okay.
themselves in terms of like what level they're actually achieving in terms of, does it kind of get them up to speed in terms of like your expectations?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's just another way to bring sort of awareness to how well they're performing in the class. Again, not every student is then going to use this throughout the semester. In a perfect world, each one of them would use this. And that's sort of why I also use Blackboard at ASU. And so I try to sort of create a similar type of system in Blackboard. It's a little bit jerry-rigged at this point because of sort of the capabilities of Blackboard. But I do find that at least it brings that awareness to them. It's something that is tangible, so they can look at it. And oftentimes, it allows me sort of to say, listen, if you're curious about how well you need to do for the remainder of the semester, you have a tool available to you, and you don't have to ask me how you're performing. This is something that they can all calculate easily, and this system sort of automates it for them on day one of the class. So you hope that it also sort of helps in the whole point of this webinar is to sort of help to eliminate any confusion about how I'm actually grading in this class. And so I do hope it sort of brings that sort of awareness to them, and I think it brings some clarity. But again, I can't force them to go and use the system throughout the remainder of the semester. It's sort of up to them to utilize this tool that I've sort of helped them develop.